Our education system really had been designed for people. The core curriculum would be how to live, how to die. How to deal with the big issues in life: pain, aging, illness, death, separation. Because those are the things that plague people. And the skills for dealing with them are the most important skills that you can develop in life. One of the problems with our society is that everything is geared towards the economy. More and more we find laws are struck down because they are not good for the economy, at least for the immediate profit margin for this quarter. And education systems are designed to fit us into our slot in the economy. And those are the skills we learn. How to function well economically. Then when we get too old to function, they put us out to pasture. And we're pretty much left on our own devices. And a lot of times the skills we learned in order to be good members of the economy, good producers, good consumers, those are actually bad for us as we get older. This producing and consuming self we have here, this is a big problem. And so as we come here to meditate, which is actually to learn how to live and how to die, that's going to be one of the big issues we have to face down, this consuming and producing self. What does it consume? Well, it consumes feelings of pleasure, feelings of pain. And it tries to produce more and more pleasure. You look at your sense of who you are, it usually comes down to these two things, the producer and the consumer. So these are the habits that we have to look at as we look at ourselves. So when you meditate, first thing you learn how to do is how to produce pleasure in the present moment. Not for the sake of the pleasure in and of itself, but you're going to use it as a strategy. So often for us the pleasure is an end in and of itself, but the Buddha says, no, you can use pleasure and you can use pain, both of them, as means to a higher end. How to use pleasure? Focus on the breath right now and see how it feels. And then experiment with the breath to see how the way you breathe can produce either pleasure or pain. It may be subtle, the difference between the two, but it's there. And because we've learned to desensitize ourselves to this aspect of our awareness, it's going to take a while to begin to see the patterns. This is why we practice. Keep coming back to the breath, coming back to the breath. So we get more and more sensitive to this area of our awareness and get more and more skilled at learning how to maximize the potential for pleasure right here and now, simply by the way we breathe. Not only producing pleasure, but also maintaining it. After all, feelings of pleasure and rapture are part of the path. They're tucked in the Noble Eightfold Path under right concentration. As the Buddha said, this kind of pleasure is pleasure without drawbacks. It's a blameless pleasure. It's also a useful pleasure, because then you can use it to examine the pain that may be in other parts of the body. When you sit here, it's very difficult to get the whole body saturated in pleasure. It's possible from time to time. But you can't expect that it will always be nothing but pleasure in the body. There are going to be parts that you can't make pleasurable. So as John Lee says, don't lie down right there. It's like knowing that there are rotten boards in your house on the floor. So if you try to lie down on that part of the floor, you're going to fall through to the basement. So lie down in the places where the boards are sound. And as that pleasure gets more and more solid, then you can start looking at the pain, because you've got a good vantage point. And hopefully the meditation by that point has taught you to be inquisitive. You've been learning about the breath. Well, how about these other parts that you can't make go as you like them to? What's going on there? Is it related to the breath energy? That's one way you can deal with it. Think of breathing through the pain. See what that does. Or you can notice how you label the pain. There may be a mental image to go along with it. Try dropping the image. See what's left. In other words, you want to develop an inquisitive attitude into pain and put yourself in a position where you don't feel threatened by it, so you can probe and ask questions and watch and observe and learn about the pain. So that pain holds no mysteries for you. It holds no fear. Because you understand not only the sensation of pain, but you also see how the mind can latch onto it and create a lot of problems. And so you learn to abstain from those ways of latching on. It's like knowing you stick your finger into a flame, it's going to burn, so you stop sticking your fingers into flames. And as you do this, you learn more and more about the mind and more about ways to not get yourself involved in suffering. You may start out with little tiny pains, little tiny disturbances. But once you've figured them out, then you find that you're more interested. How about the bigger pains? This is probably one of the most important parts of the practice, is that willingness to rise to a challenge. So you don't feel overwhelmed by things. You've seen them, people who have problems in their lives and all they can think about is complaining. This isn't going right, that's not going right, people don't sympathize with me. And all they're doing is just piling more suffering onto the original suffering. They see a challenge, they see something difficult, and they just faint, or they whine and complain. That's not the Buddha's way. His way is to give you the skills, the tools you need, and then also try to fire you up to rise up to these challenges. Because if you don't rise up to the challenges, they are going to overcome you. So one way of making you ready for the challenge is to give you the tools, so you're not totally defenseless. And the Buddha, in the story of his life, gives you examples. The stories of the noble disciples give the same examples, how you find yourself in a difficult situation and can rise above it, using your wits, using the resources you've got. So here we are with our breath, and we've got pain sometimes, we've got distractions at other times, sometimes both together. And we tend to regard them as the mosquitoes that are swarming around us as we meditate. We'd like to swat them and get rid of them so we can actually get down to the real business of meditating. But dealing with the distractions, dealing with the pain, that's the meat of the meditation. Because as we're saying today, when you die, the big problems are going to be distraction and pain. Even before you die, as you get older. You probably notice this with old people. They can't look ahead. into the future because all they see in the future is death. So they start looking behind, cut off large parts of their awareness. The mind just can't accept what's